Throughout my wife Sophie and my time together, we've had a common thread of experiencing nature and animal life together. And we were recently very lucky to go on a safari in South Africa. Now, most tours, if you've got a guide, which I would recommend, given the dangerousness of some of these animals, have a 10-passenger Jeep. And it's open air to give you a more immersive experience. However, we were still safe. We were told by our tour guides to just make sure we didn't put our hands outside the Jeep or stand up, because then that would break the line of sight, and then we might be in danger. Now, on our 2-day trip in total, we were very fortunate to have very few people with us. Most of the time, there was an average of 3 people, except for one morning. So what that meant is on the seats in the back of this giant open door Jeep, we tended to have just one row to ourselves. So that meant I could be on one side and Sophie could be on the other side. Now, when it came to looking for the animals, there were 2 possibilities of how I could approach this. One would be to let Sophie have one side and for me to have the other. Now, I didn't really have any experience to tell me whether Sophie could do this or not. The closest thing I could think of was one of our first nature trips together, a trip to Glacier National Park in Montana. And there we didn't have a tour guide. I was the one driving in a rental car, and we go down the road and all of a sudden there's a grizzly bear crossing the road. So not having a tour guide, being in a rental car, I was kind of freaked out by this and pulled over to the side of the road. Sophie had completely missed this, in large part because she was our navigator and she was looking at the map and she was doing her job the way she was supposed to. So that was the only thing coming to my mind when we were on this safari together. But even with that, and understanding the fullness of Sophie having been a navigator, I decided in that moment to trust her. To say, okay, if she's looking over on this side, she will catch whatever animal she gets a glimpse of, whatever animal is over there. And I can just focus on seeing what's there on the other side. And this ended up being the exact right thing to do, because it turns out that Sophie spotted one of the best animals of the trip. She spotted 2 hyenas. And they were both just on the road at a part of the Jeep that no one else could have spotted. If I had been looking over there, I would have completely missed. So we had this wonderful experience, 100% fully thanks to Sophie. Trust was what I needed to get through this moment. Trusting in Sophie, trusting in her ability. Even though I had no proof, no experience that this was something that she could do. And this brings us to one of the big themes in our readings today. Faith. And here we get into an issue of how we look at things from our modern perspective versus how people would have looked at this in the ancient world. When we tend to think about faith, we think about belief. And belief often for us involves existence. So when we say, I believe in God, what we're often really saying is that we believe that God exists. But the ancient word for faith means so much more. The ancient word for faith actually means to trust. So what I had for Sophie, that trust, that really was faith. Faith, trust, is something that we have without any sense of experience. And this is what we see today with Abraham. Abram, who later becomes Abraham, a more famous name that he's known by, is told by God to leave his home, to leave everything that he has ever known, to leave behind what would have been his inheritance, to go off into the unknown, into something he had never been, a place he didn't know. And that if he did so, God would make him into a great nation. And this is in spite of the fact that Abraham had no children, no heirs to be that great nation. So this is no small thing that God is asking of Abraham. And it becomes an even greater thing when we think about, did Abraham actually know God at this point? Was God a God Abraham worshipped? And we have no idea what the answer is from the biblical account. It's possible it was the case. Abraham later meets Melchizedek, who is both a priest and king of Salem. Melchizedek clearly worships God. But with Abraham, we don't know. We don't know if he even knew who God was. Either way, Abraham is putting a lot of trust in God to accomplish what the Lord has promised. And it doesn't end here with going to a completely new land, for leaving all the comfort that he would have had behind. No, as Paul tells us this morning, Abraham's faith continues from there. Continues with God's promise to Abraham that he will finally have a son with his wife Sarah. It continues even though Abraham and Sarah are very old and well past child-rearing years. It continues even though what God promises is really the impossible. Abraham trusts in God, even though he has nothing in his experience to tell him to do so. He has faith. And Paul reminds us of the words that we hear in Genesis, that faith was reckoned to Abraham as righteousness. And that same faith, that same trust, is what we see in Matthew this morning. That faith and trust to, without knowing anything else, follow Jesus merely after hearing the words, "Follow me." It's the same trust that leads the leader of the synagogue to believe that Jesus can bring his dead daughter back to life, even though such a feat is impossible. It's the same faith that leads the woman with the a hemorrhage she had for 12 years. It's that trust that she has, that she believes that if she just touches Jesus' cloak, nothing else, that she will be free of this affliction. To have faith doesn't simply mean to believe in God's existence. It means so much more than that. To have faith means to trust in God. And that trust is not founded on anything we've experienced. How can it be when so much that we see God accomplish is impossible, is beyond anything we have ever encountered before? We trust not because of what we know, but merely because we assume that God is trustworthy. And we don't need God to prove that to us. We simply have to have faith, to trust, to believe.